You can probably already tell by the title of this podcast, but just in case, a heads up. Adult language will definitely be making an appearance. So if you're at work, around the kids, or just in front of some judgy pets, you might want to grab some headphones. Here we go. Hey, it's Leslie. Welcome back to My Effing Desk. I'm excited for you to meet our next guest, Abby Sher. She's a writer and performer who's worked with Second City, Upright Citizens Brigade, HBO, Nick Jr., and NPR. She's also the author of 6 books, 2 of which came out this year, including Miss You, Love You, Hate You, Bye, and Sanctuary, which we talk about in this discussion. Abby Sher's also appeared in the New York Times, the New Yorker, Washington Post, LA Times, and one of her essays was actually adapted for the television series Modern Love. And in addition to all of that, Abby has 3 kids. So she's the living embodiment of My Effing Desk, making it work every day, juggling motherhood and creativity. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, I really appreciate it. And, I feel kind of like we were talking about before that you know what this is. You know what it's like to wear all the hats.
Yeah. One of my kids just ended remote learning. I can tell upstairs. And I was like, I'm still in the basement. So I'm just telling you.
Right. So all 3 of yours are at home doing remote learning, or how's that working?
Yeah. My husband and I switch days when we're in charge of what. So we haven't killed each other yet.
But the year is still young, I guess.
The year is still young.
The school year is still young.
And there's so many weapons.
So getting into creativity, and you do all these things. I saw you have a theater background, improv and writing and music. Do you think that creativity was kind of always a part of your life? Is that something you came into later?
Oh, that's a great question. There was always music in my house. So my dad was always singing something under his breath. There were instruments in my life. Like I was waiting till I could reach the piano keys. And yet there was definitely like a split between who could be creative for their life and then who had to go and pay the bills. So as the story goes, although I don't really know for sure because my parents have passed, but my dad really wanted to pursue singing and dancing, and he was really great at it. But his dad said, a man has to provide for his family. And so he became a tax attorney. And my mom similarly was writing all the time, just so many journals that I uncovered. And she worked for Random House. She was an editor, and then she had kids. And it was like, and now I stay home and take care of the kids. So there was always creativity happening in our home, but it felt like it wasn't a sustainable choice.
I feel like that is so much of the traditional view, right? That a lot of us still struggle with that, of it being all or nothing, that you kind of have to throw everything into it and be like the traditional, the stereotypical starving artist, or get the real safe job and sort of let that other stuff go.
Right.
Yeah. Obviously you were immersed in it completely, like writing and music and all that. How did that affect you when you kind of set out on your own and were looking for a career or looking at your options? Did you have that kind of duality in your mind, or did you feel like there was a middle ground somewhere?
I don't know that it was conscious. Like, I think that I went to school in Chicago. I went to University of Chicago, kicking and screaming because I wanted to be closer to home on the East Coast. And I didn't get in to the places I wanted on the East Coast. And it wound up being the best thing for me to go away and just to have some space. I studied Russian language, which you can tell I used a lot of. Yeah, I can probably speak like 2 sentences now. But I was always very fascinated by languages, and I knew that my grandparents were from Russia, so I wanted to, connect the dots that I felt were disconnected within me. And I always wrote, but that was where I felt like I started really seeing how writing could be like a daily practice that could help me get through hard times. And most of that was actually through a friend that whom I met there, who introduced me to improv. And, we would sit in coffee shops and write, and she just had it as part of her daily discipline. And it was really exciting to me. And she's also the one that introduced me to Second City, although I should say it different. My mom actually took me to Second City the night we arrived in Chicago, but it didn't dawn on me at all. Like, I had a good time, but it didn't dawn on me at all. Like, this is where I want to be. It was just a good distraction because I was so nervous about going to school the next day.
I mean, isn't that what good art is? The distraction from your everyday worries or big worries. That's so funny that you majored in Russian. I majored in Spanish. What is it with
really?
languages? Yes. You mentioned it as kind of becoming like a daily practice and almost therapy, which is so interesting because when I was reading some of your work, particularly your essays, it seems therapeutic to you. Do you still feel that way? Like kind of writing out what's going on with you? Is that a form of therapy for you think?
Definitely. And it's free.
It's free.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the acting world for a long time, and sitting in an audition room or in a waiting room for an audition, the best thing to do would be to have a journal with me and just, pretend that I had to write something really important, even if all I was writing was, this sucks, I suck, over and over again. It was really helpful to have that space, and it still is every day. I literally look forward to that quiet moment before everybody else is up with my coffee and my journal.
Is that when you do your writing, like not just journaling, but working on your next project in the morning, or when do you fit that in?
Yeah, great question. I think it has changed over the years. Well, when I was performing regularly, I was a night owl. Then you start making family and you're like, 5 a.m., I can get up then. Or don't ever wake me up before 10 a.m., whatever it is. My secret trick, I guess, is to get up before my kids get up and have some time just to write and read. And then now that we're in this situation with remote learning, everything is remote where I am right now. So my husband and I flip-flop days, and some days I get to work in my little cave in the basement while the kids are online upstairs. And then the other days I do remote learning with them and, fit in an hour or two, maybe in the afternoon.
Do you find it hard to write right now, or at least about the same things as before? Before Corona, everything's like before and after now. Are you able to concentrate and make that work, or has it shifted?
No, it's definitely shifted. Yeah. I feel like everything I was planning to write feels really unimportant and kind of self-indulgent. Like, I don't want to hear about it because I really need to be writing about George Floyd crying out for his mom, or I really want to be writing about the psychological effects of being inside for 8 months. I think that there are such more pressing concerns right now.
Absolutely. I tend to write humor, and it's been so hard to write anything but satire or just really dark gallows humor because of everything you just mentioned. There's so many pressing things, like socially, politically, of course, and the psychological effects. It feels like such a turning point, especially because it's lasted so much longer than we thought at the beginning. Like in March, it was kind of, we'll hunker down for a few weeks, we'll get through this together, we'll all watch Netflix. And now that it's just stretching on, it's like, okay, it's been 7 months. Like, we're coming up on 8. What about Thanksgiving? And talking about dick jokes just doesn't
Right.
feel true.
Yeah, it was like there were a couple of really great humor pieces in the beginning of the bingo ones about the things you're going to hear on Zoom. And I was like, haha, that was hilarious. And now I'm like, oh, that would make me cry if I read that right now.
Yes, absolutely. I have a definite ounce of sympathy for the SNL writers trying to come up with anything. Well, that kind of leads me into the discussion about Sanctuary, one of your books that came out this year. what a fitting time for it to come out. Tell us a little bit about it and kind of how that collaboration came about.
I'm really proud of this book. I co-wrote it with Paola Mendoza, who is an activist, one of the founders of the Women's March, and she's been working in immigration for over a decade. To be honest, my agent put us together. I think she had heard me say that I felt like I needed to have more meaning to what I was writing, or more connection to what was going on in the world, because I love writing fiction, but I also felt like I'm a white girl speaking from the suburbs. So it was really, really humbling to read up on what Paola was doing. She was helping families in the caravan in 2018, and she was helping people activate when family separation became a policy. And she helped fight family separation, and they got it, they got it nullified in 6 weeks, I believe. But the policy itself was it's still so tragic, and it's still actually going on, whether we know about it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But she was right there with families that were going through it. And I think, as she says it, that she had this vision of like, well, what if we couldn't stop it from becoming a law? And what if this government just kept this going? And she had this idea for a book that was vaguely dystopian about what our country would look like. And so we sat down to write it. And I swear, every time we came up with a new plot twist that I thought was too cruel or too inhuman, then I would get a news alert that Trump had done something exactly like that. And I used to joke, like, I guess it was the only funny thing out of it. I used to joke, like, it's fine that he's doing horrible crimes, but he can't take our plot too. And and I literally, because she had seen it and she continues to see these things play out. I didn't believe that they could happen until I sat down with her. So the book takes place in 2032. It's not that far in the future. And that's purposeful because we wanted to show that this country is very close to becoming like this. The protagonist is a 16-year-old girl named Valeria, who is undocumented, and she's living in Vermont. And everyone in the country at this point is chipped. They have an identification chip. And she and her mom are undocumented, and the fake chips that they have start malfunctioning. And the government starts coming in and rounding up anyone who is not a citizen and taking them. Nobody knows where they're taking them. And so Valley has to take her and her brother to safety, to sanctuary. And it was really the opposite of comedic working on this book, but it was so meaningful and such a privilege. And I love collaborating with Paola, and I hope we get to do it more. We're in talks with production companies about making it into a movie that we have already mapped out, and we've already mapped out the second book. We just have to get the green light on that.
That's wonderful. In reading it, it's kind of appropriate that you classified it as vaguely dystopian, because it's not that far in the future. And I found myself starting it off and thinking, wait, when is this? This is supposed to be futuristic, right? But it was so, you can see it happening. And I think that's terrifying, but it also speaks to how carefully you two thought this through, that it's just a little bit further than where we are, and how gut-wrenching that you had to change parts of it because it was actually happening, but not unbelievable at all. It's wow.
And I think it can be, like there was a report last week that 545 kids are still displaced from their parents. They're just missing.
Yeah.
And then there was a report 2 weeks before that where, they had Jeff Sessions on record saying we need to get those kids, in terms of like, that's the only way we can stop immigrants from coming in. Just grab their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And these headlines are so surreal if you really look at them for more than a minute. But because our world is so surreal, those get completely wiped away.
Yes. I had mentioned to you that my husband's an immigrant, and I was a bilingual teacher for many years here in Austin. And so I had students who are undocumented. And of course, this issue would affect anyone, I think. But there's such a strong urge to do something, to speak out, and feeling just kind of powerless. And then, at least where I live, when you do speak out, sometimes being met with this unconscionable objection or justification to what's going on. Is any of that kind of why you felt like what you were saying to your agent, that you wanted something more meaningful, like something to kind of stand up and take a stand on these issues in a public way through your work?
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't feel like I was ever an activist before working on this book. I felt like it was exciting, but it wasn't something that I aimed to do. And through working on this book, I think I saw how many counter arguments there are, which also is just mind blowing. Like the misconceptions that immigrants can just, go wait online and get their papers.
Right.
Like there is no line.
No.
There's actually no way to get papers right now. It's such a brutal process and sometimes literally impossible. And then the idea that somebody could be seeking asylum because they've been tortured, or the gangs have just killed the rest of their family, but then they have to prove their hardship in a different country.
And sometimes not even that. Like sometimes just when they are coming to the border to present themselves at the point of entry for asylum and still getting turned away or their kids taken. It's, I think that most people just aren't familiar enough with the process and knowing, kind of like you said, that there is no line, that they are doing it the quote unquote right way, and they're still being met with these injustices. So I think it's so important to put a face on these issues. And I think that you two did such a great job of that, really humanizing it even more. And the fact that Teen Vogue picked it up for their book club is so great, so hopeful, getting young kids to really see what this is and not just believing maybe the things they're hearing other places. Having some empathy. I thought it was really neat how code switching was incorporated in the book, like the switching back and forth of the languages. Well, you're a language major, you know it, code switching. I love it. But those little bits interspersed with the full Spanish sentences, or maybe just a word or two, because that's how bilingual people talk and bicultural. Was there any concern that you know of that the publisher or anyone else thought that maybe audiences or readers wouldn't know what that meant?
I don't think so. I think we had two pretty clear, not requirements, but goals that we were pretty firm on when we took it out to publishers. The excerpt that we brought had Spanish in it. Some characters were speaking both languages, and we didn't want that to change. We didn't want it to be italicized. We didn't want it to be like an other language. Right. And then our other goal was to get it out before the election, because it felt like we need this to be in the zeitgeist so that this is part of if no other issue moves you, does a drowning child in the Rio Grande change you? And that's kind of why I want to shake up the world, is because there's no part of this country, I think, that truly wants 545 children to be missing right now because of our fault, or, children being, drugged in detention centers. Like if people actually knew that this was happening, would we really still be voting like this?
I think that's true. I think that it's a lot of the times ignorance of what is actually happening, or sort of a self-protection thing because it's so horrendous and gut-wrenching that if you allowed your mind to go there, you would just crumble, especially thinking that you had somehow contributed to that by your vote.
And I guess the other side of at least our goals with this book is that the hero is 16-year-old Valley also. Like she's not a victim. It's definitely gut-wrenching, as you said, but it's also heroic. She doesn't want to be a revolutionary, but she can't be a bystander anymore. And I think that's what's going on in this country a lot, is there's so many people saying, wow, I stood by while all this was happening. I stood by while systemic racism was just like flowering around me. And even some of the things I've done have added to it. And no more. I can't do this anymore. I can't live this hypocritically anymore. I have to stand up for these things that I believe in, even if it takes away from my me time, even if it, whatever it is. In her case, she winds up having to run for her life, but she doesn't want to. She wants to be a teenager. She just wants to get the right lip gloss and, and have friends.
Yeah. And that's something we forget, I think, about people in these situations. Like you think of, it's so stereotypical, but the Diary of Anne Frank and reading the things that she wrote, it was very typical teenage girl stuff. And now being so far removed, you picture her as this heroine and almost just not real anymore, an icon. But she was talking about teeny bopper stuff, just like anyone would be doing. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of why bother? Why do you bother to
I don't know.
I know, right? Like, this is probably not the best question. Being a mom of 3, you have surely so much going on. And I myself, kind of in my darkest moments, find myself thinking it's so much easier to just let myself go, to just kind of let myself get swallowed up in all the other things that I have to do, laundry, taking care of the kids, getting them to school, whatever. And then my personal life. Like, why do I even go on auditions or do submissions or all these things that just, number one, have such a high failure or rejection rate? And number 2, just takes so much mental energy. But at the same time, I think I do it because I have to. I feel like that makes me me. Is it a similar thing for you? Is it kind of what motivates you to keep pushing and making that time for your art?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it can often feel very selfish that I'm sitting in the basement writing my journal when I know that my kids could use my help upstairs. But I also think I'm a better person if I have that time to be creative. And I literally, in this moment of moments of so much uncertainty in the world, it's hard to justify like sitting down to write, I don't know, jokes about democracy while there are so many things to be done. But really, would I be changing the fate of America if I didn't sit down and write those jokes? What would I be doing that would be so much more heroic than this? And I think our kids do learn from us that the things that we hold important. I mean, it's not that I don't do the laundry or that I don't go to the grocery store or that I don't wipe their noses or help them with school, but they know mommy needs to do her silly things also. Mm-hmm. And mommy feels better when she picks up her ukulele or draws things on the chalkboard or whatever it is. And we've been having a lot of fun as a family. We just started writing songs and performing them. And they're just silly and stupid, but it's gotten us through. And now the kids like suggest what song we should do next time. And they're a little too into like, do people like us on social media? So I have to tone that down a little bit. But the fact is, like, there's nothing like saying, go think of what your costume is going to be. And it makes them happy for like an hour.
I love that. And for people who haven't seen it, I'll put a link in the show notes. But Abby does these great videos with her kids, and they're usually, I don't know, maybe I've missed one, but it seems like they're usually about voting and
they started out being about the pandemic. Okay. It started with quarantine because we thought that was going to be like a joke. And then, it started in March and now it's, almost November. So we had to switch topics.
We thought that was going to be funny until it dragged on until almost November. But they're great because the kids do get into it. And I thought that was such a great visual representation of what this whole thing is about. I've been thinking of, or I think many of us think of motherhood and creativity as separate. But there it was like, oh, it's all together. So not only have you provided this example for them, but letting them be a part of it and getting them excited about it. It was like you could see their creativity start to feed off of yours, which was brilliant.
Oh, thank you. The key is very, very little rehearsal so that they don't get frustrated.
That makes sense.
So,
and making it about the fun too. It seems like not worrying about how many views it's gotten or who likes it. It's just.
No, I don't let them even see that, to be honest. I think they get a kick out of seeing the actual original singers. So like if we're doing, I don't know, the Bangles, then they look at a picture of the Bangles and they like imitating who they think they are in the group. So I get them sort of like riled up about the group instead of themselves.
That's great. All right. Let's jump into our lightning round real quick before both go our separate ways. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question is, I think I already know the answer from what we've heard earlier, but what's your effing desk? Your creative area could be physical or otherwise. That's just yours, sort of your sacred space.
Yeah, it's this drafty little corner of my basement.
Whatever works.
But I have a candle that smells good, so there's that.
Nice. What's keeping you sane right now?
I think music.
Is that something you're listening to by yourself or with everyone or just any kind?
Any kind. At this point, any kind. Yeah.
What's your best life hack? Could be creative or otherwise.
Oh, always put your keys in the same spot.
I like it.
So it's like right in this one pocket of my little bag.
Yes. One less thing to worry about. I like it. If you could do anything besides what you're doing right now, what would it be?
I think I would be a doula.
Oh.
I mean, I really can't handle it with my squeamishness, but I think I would.
Just let me hold the babies. I don't want to see all the
right. I've been through the screaming. Yeah. But if I could help somebody else get their baby out, that would be really nice.
I could see that. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Don't take yourself so seriously.
Oh, yeah. Don't we all need that right now? Don't take any of it so seriously. What about the worst advice?
The worst advice, join an a cappella group.
Hey, I resent that. The sirens were wonderful. All right. Fill in the blank. Imposter syndrome is?
Real.
Oh, yes. What was the last thing you read?
Oh, I'm reading a beautiful book called The Lost Children Archive. And it's by a gorgeous writer. I always say her name wrong, so I'm going to look it up. Valeria Luiselli.
Oh, nice.
I love it. It's really good.
If you could have a song played every time you entered into a room, not a cappella, what would it be?
That girl is poison.
Every time I hear that song, did you ever watch Scrubs?
No.
It's going to be one of these awkward moments where I just describe it. But anyway, they just jammed out to Belle Biv DeVoe. And every time I hear that song, I think of that.
Oh, nice.
Okay, last question. What's next on your bucket list?
Surviving.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to write an adult novel that makes me feel very proud.
It's like short-term survive, long-term an adult novel. I get it. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was great to talk to you, and I can't wait to see what's next for you. Keep making those hilarious videos and getting your me time up there or down there in your basement.
In my basement. Thank you so much. This has been really a real treat.
I love the idea of art as activism because it shows that art can not only be therapeutic to ourselves, as Abby and I were discussing, it can be therapeutic to the world. It can change systems that are no longer working or maybe shouldn't have been in place in the first place and help us shape our society into a better place for everyone to live in. I also love that Abby didn't see herself in that role in the beginning and kind of knew that there was something else, that another place she wanted to take her art. And so she pushed herself and found herself in this new role. You can find out more about Abby on her website, Abby-Sher, that's SHER.com. She also has a link there to her new book, Sanctuary. And for those videos that we were talking about that she makes with her kids, those are on her Instagram page. It's instagram.com/Abby Sher. They're so cute and fun. You can also find Abby on Twitter at Abby Sher or on Facebook at Abby J. Sher. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to share the very first review and rating that My Effing Desk has gotten. And lo and behold, it's a 5-star rating from Mejia People. And she writes this in her review. As a woman and a mother trying to keep my creative mojo going, this podcast is exactly what I need in my life. Leslie is a great interviewer, and this podcast has legs. Woo! Thank you so much, Mejia People. Everybody else, if you're enjoying the show, head on over to wherever it is that you download your podcast and give it a rating and a review. Just takes a couple minutes, super easy peasy, and it helps everybody else find the podcast. The more reviews and ratings it has, the higher it bumps up in the rankings. So thanks a lot. While you're at it, you can go check out our website at myeffingdeskpodcast.com. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at myeffingdeskpodcast and on Twitter at myeffingdeskpod. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, go shake some shit up.